Dr. Kieran Vale had always dreamed of touching the unknown. From the moment he'd set foot on Europa's icy surface, he knew he wasn't meant for Earth's humdrum existence. As NextCorp's lead exogeologist, he'd mapped the shifting cryovolcanoes of Europa, deciphered ancient ice ridges on Enceladus, and even waded through the methane lakes of Enceladus. But Titan? Titan was something else entirely. Titan whispered to him through the stars. The transmission had come 2 weeks prior. A strange signal, repeating every 66 seconds, emanated from Titan's southern hemisphere. It wasn't random static. It wasn't a cosmic anomaly. It was structured, mathematical, intelligent. Someone or something was calling. NextCorp had made their move quickly, authorizing a rapid deployment. Now, Kieran stood on Titan's surface, a vast sea of methane and nitrogen stretching before him, his breath shallow inside his suit, his heart pounding as the cold gnawed at his bones. The ground beneath him felt like it was breathing. He looked up at the sky, a deep and distant blue, swirling with ethereal clouds. Above him, the distant, looming shadow of Saturn filled the heavens. Rings of ice and rock encircled the gas giant, casting a faint glow on the surface. But the object in front of him, that was all-consuming. He could feel its presence like a heavy weight pressing against his chest, a monolith. Blacker than the void, it rose from the methane sea, standing impossibly tall against the horizon. Its surface wasn't smooth like rock or ice, but alive. Rippling, undulating in a way that defied logic. As though the object itself was a living entity. Kieran's suit AI buzzed in his ear, running diagnostic scans, but the data was incomprehensible. It was a mess, bits of ancient symbols, data patterns that seemed to glitch in and out of existence. None of it made sense. Is it alive? Daniel Grayson, the technician, asked from behind Kieran, his voice filled with awe and dread. I don't know. Kieran's voice trembled. But it's not just a rock, that much I know. Commander Elise Hartwell stood next to him, silent, her gaze locked on the monolith. She didn't need to speak. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone could feel it, the pull of something ancient, something powerful, something far beyond their understanding. Kieran reached out, his gloved hand touching the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of pain shot through his body. His breath hitched, his vision blurred, as if he were being pulled into a dark abyss. His helmet visor cracked in a flash, and his body began to convulse. Vale! Elise screamed, reaching forward, but she was too late. The monolith pulsed with an eerie blue light, and something vast and hungry, stirred beneath the surface. His body jerked violently, his mouth opening, but the words that escaped weren't his. They came from somewhere else. Somewhere, ancient. We are waiting. We are beneath. We are hungry. Kieran's eyes went black, and his screams were swallowed by static. Elise grabbed him, trying to stabilize him, but the air around them thickened. The tendrils, black as night, emerged from the crack in Kieran's visor, slithering and curling toward her like a living thing. Then everything went silent. And Kieran's body fell limp. The silence was suffocating. Elise felt the weight of it pressing in on her chest, her breath coming out in sharp gasps inside her suit. She could still hear the soft hum of the monolith in the distance, but Kieran wasn't moving. Daniel hesitated, his hands shaking as he glanced from Kieran's unconscious body to Elise. Elise, his suit, if we remove it. We don't have time, she snapped, her voice raw with urgency. She didn't care about the suit. She didn't care about protocol. All that mattered was saving Kieran before whatever had taken hold of him spread to her. Her hands flew to the release latch on his collar. The suit's systems hissed, and the cracked helmet popped open. A wave of poisonous Titan air rushed in, but the suit's emergency systems kicked in. Elise didn't wait. She pulled the helmet off completely, revealing Kieran's pale, sweat-drenched face. His eyes fluttered, his body still spasming as though trapped in the throes of a nightmare. His mouth moved, forming words in a language she didn't understand. Vale, wake up, she shouted, shaking his shoulders. His eyes flickered open, focusing on her. The familiar, grounded look of the Kieran she knew was gone. His pupils had vanished. His eyes were now solid black, swirling with the same unsettling energy that had once emanated from the monolith. He gasped for breath, as though awakening from a deep, drugged slumber. His eyes darted frantically around, recognizing nothing, and then his voice had returned to normal. Elise, what happened? His voice was hoarse, fragile, as if he didn't fully recognize what had transpired. Nothing good, Elise muttered, casting a glance at the monolith in the distance. The runes that had once glowed a soft blue had now shifted to a fiery red. It pulsed with a malignant energy. Something had changed. She tried to focus on Kieran. We need to get back to the shuttle, now. She helped him to his feet, but he stumbled, disoriented. She wanted to say more, but the words got caught in her throat. They began their trek through the methane muck, their boots sinking slightly with each step. Every movement felt too heavy. Too slow. The very air around them seemed to press down, and the distant sky, once serene, had twisted into something far more alien. The stars were wrong. The vortex above them stretched beyond anything they could measure. Do you hear that? Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. It's like everything is whispering. Kieran's eyes darted around, and his voice was a mere rasp. We're not alone. We never were. The ground trembled again. It was subtle at first, just a small shake beneath their feet. Then, the tremors increased, sending vibrations through the air. Elise looked up, her heart hammering in her chest. Oh God, not again. Kieran's voice quivered as he reached for Elise's arm. But something beneath the surface had already begun to move. A jagged crack formed beneath their feet, splitting the icy terrain wide open. The ground buckled, and Kieran's shuttle, the one that had carried them here, was swallowed by the massive fissure, disappearing into the depths below. The very ground seemed to split apart like some great chasm, pulling them toward it. What the hell is happening? Daniel shouted. Before anyone could react, something emerged from the dark rift below. A massive, undulating shape. It was blacker than the void, slick with a viscous, dark liquid that gleamed under the light of Saturn's distant glow. It moved, twisting and pulsing, its surface alive with movement. Eyes blinked in and out of existence along its flesh, and its whispers that were no longer in human tongues, filled the air like an overwhelming chorus. Elise took a step back, heart pounding, mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. It was enormous, growing larger with every moment, its surface shifting. With patterns that were indecipherable. The whispers were growing louder, rising until they threatened to overwhelm her thoughts. Kieran's expression remained eerily calm. We were never meant to leave. Daniel's voice cracked. This is beyond us. As the creature reared up, its form shifting in and out of focus, the monolith pulsed once more. Its runes burned bright red, casting a sinister glow across the sea of methane. And then, as the creature's shadow loomed above them, everything went dark. Elise's vision faded, her body falling to the cold, alien ground. Her last thought was a single, chilling realization: the monolith had called. And something had answered. When Elise awoke, she was weightless, suspended in a vast, incomprehensible space. No walls, no ground, just an endless stretch of blackness. Her body drifted in the void, and for a moment, she thought she was dead. But then, the whispers began again. She wasn't sure if it was her mind playing tricks, but they were there. Subtle at first, but growing clearer, wrapping themselves around her consciousness like a vine. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged. Instead, shapes appeared in the dark, massive, shifting figures, their eyes like dying stars, watching her, studying her, never blinking. You are chosen. A voice vibrated through her very bones, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere. The blackness pulsed, and before her a light sparked into existence. It illuminated the abyss, revealing the second monolith. It was enormous, more imposing than the first, its surface slick with liquid that shimmered and shifted in patterns she could not comprehend. And in the center of it, Kieran. He floated, his eyes glowing like twin suns, his expression serene and detached from all reality. Kieran's body felt heavy, as though the weight of the universe itself was pressing down on him. His mind swam in a sea of flashing images, memories that weren't his own, ancient worlds torn apart by conflict, civilizations rising and falling in the blink of an eye. His heart raced, his breath shallow, as though he were drowning in a flood of alien thoughts. But then it stopped. The visions faded, leaving him breathless and disoriented on the cold ground beneath the monolith. The air was thick with the hum of power, and the ground continued to tremble under the growing force of the structure. He lifted his head slowly, blinking against the harsh light. He wasn't alone. Elise stood at his side, her face pale, eyes wide with fear, but there was a determination in them too. Kieran, talk to me, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. What did you see? Kieran struggled to focus. His eyes met hers, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer entirely in control of his thoughts. It felt as if a part of him had been pulled into something far greater, something vast and incomprehensible. I don't know, he said, his voice rough. I saw things, Elise. Civilizations, ancient empires destroyed by their own hubris. This monolith, it's been waiting for something or someone for a long time. And now that we've activated it, it's waking up. He stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. Elise grabbed his arm, her grip firm but her hands trembling. We need to leave, Kieran. Now. But Kieran shook his head. We can't. We have to figure out what's going on before it's too late. Behind them, Daniel had managed to get to his feet, his eyes wild, scanning the landscape. This place is a nightmare. We've unleashed something we can't control. Look at it. His voice cracked. It's alive. We need to get out of here. Kieran turned to look at him, but his gaze was drawn back to the monolith. It was no longer just an object, it was a presence. A force. The air around them pulsed with energy, the ground splitting open in jagged, unnatural lines, as if the very planet was being reshaped by some unknown power. Do you hear that? Kieran asked, his voice distant. Elise frowned but strained her ears to listen. At first, it was faint, a soft, whispering hum that seemed to come from every direction. Then it grew louder, more distinct. It was a language, but not one they recognized. It sounded ancient, almost like a song sung across the ages. Elise moved toward the monolith, her face set in determination. We need to understand it. If it's calling us, maybe there's a way to shut it down. Kieran nodded, though a part of him still felt drawn to it, unwilling to tear himself away from its pull. Whatever it is, it's not just a machine. It's a relic of something far older, something beyond us. We need to find out what it wants before it's too late. But as they approached, the ground beneath their feet buckled. The hum became a roar, deafening and all-consuming. And then, like a door slamming open in the darkness, a blinding light surged from the monolith, engulfing them all. The light was unlike anything Kieran had ever experienced. It wasn't just bright, it was a force that seemed to reach into him, touching something deep inside, something primal. For a moment, he lost himself in it, as if the world had ceased to exist. There was no sound, no motion, just the overwhelming presence of the monolith, the power that had now been fully unleashed. But as quickly as it came, it was gone. Kieran blinked, disoriented, his senses returning slowly. His vision cleared, and he realized they were no longer standing in the same place. The monolith had shifted. The landscape had changed. He was standing in what looked like an ancient city, crumbling towers of stone, monuments to a civilization long since destroyed. The air was thick with dust, and the ground beneath him was cracked and broken, as if some cataclysm had torn the city apart. Elise! Kieran shouted, panic rising in his chest. Daniel! Elise's voice came from behind him. Kieran, what's happening? Where are we? He turned to see her and Daniel standing at the edge of a shattered bridge, their expressions filled with confusion and fear. But before he could answer, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. Move! Kieran yelled. Get back! But it was too late. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and a massive rift opened up, swallowing the bridge in an instant. Kieran barely had time to react before the force of the explosion sent him flying backward, landing hard on the cold stone. He looked up in time to see something emerge from the rift, a massive shape, black and shifting, its form constantly changing, as though it were made of pure darkness. What is that? Daniel gasped. Kieran didn't answer. His heart was pounding in his chest as he staggered to his feet, eyes fixed on the creature. It was like nothing he had ever seen, a creature born of nightmare, with countless limbs writhing and twisting in the air. The monolith's voice echoed in his mind again, but this time, it was not a whisper. It was a roar. The entity from the rift was calling to them, speaking to them through the monolith, through the fabric of space itself. You cannot escape the reckoning, the voice boomed, shaking the very foundations of the world. You have awakened us. Now you will face the consequences. Before Kieran could react, the creature lunged at them, its twisted form stretching impossibly long. Elise screamed as it reached for her, but Kieran was faster. He grabbed her arm and yanked her back just in time, the creature's tendrils barely missing them. We have to move, now, Kieran shouted, pulling Elise and Daniel toward the broken remnants of the city, but there was no escape. The creature was everywhere. It was in the air, in the ground, in their very minds. The monolith had awakened something far worse than they had ever imagined, a force that existed beyond time and space, a force that was determined to reclaim the galaxy for itself. Kieran's heart raced as they ran through the crumbling city, the sound of the creature's pursuit echoing in the distance. But he knew one thing for certain, this was only the beginning. The reckoning had arrived, and they were its first targets. Kieran's legs burned with exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to stop. The creature was relentless, its shadow stretching across the ruins, following them every step of the way. They had no plan, no way of defending themselves. The city around them was collapsing, the sky darkening as if in response to the creature's arrival. Elise, Daniel. Kieran gasped, his breath ragged. We can't outrun it. We need to find shelter. Elise glanced over her shoulder, her face pale with terror. What are we supposed to do, Kieran? This thing, it's everywhere. We're trapped. Kieran looked around, his mind racing. There had to be something, some way to stop it. He knew that whatever had awakened the monolith had also awakened this creature. They were connected, linked in some way, and he couldn't help but feel that the key to stopping it lay somewhere in the heart of the city. This way, Kieran shouted, grabbing Elise's arm and dragging her toward an ancient tower that still stood amidst the ruins. They made it to the tower's base, where a door, rusted and decayed, hung loosely from its frame. Kieran kicked it open, the wood splintering under his boot. Inside, it was dark and cold, but it offered them the temporary safety they needed. Kieran leaned against the wall, his mind still reeling from the horrors they had witnessed. We have to figure out what this thing wants. We can't just keep running. Daniel slumped to the floor, his face pale and drenched with sweat. What if it doesn't want anything? What if it just wants to destroy us? Elise knelt beside him, trying to calm him. But Kieran's gaze was fixed on the darkened sky outside, where the creature's tendrils seemed to stretch even further. It wasn't just chasing them, it was hunting them, and they were running out of time.